Right, here we go. So we're going to talk all about UKTIN today. The most common question I get when I say I've joined UKTIN to head it up, they say, well, what's that then? And so I'm going to answer that question today with the help of lots and lots of people. So we'll talk a bit about that. The rest of the day is panels and chit chat and so on, lots of Q&A, but I hope you're all going to stay for till the very end. Lots of discussion and some contrary views I hope we will see expressed and resolved during the day. And you'll see, I'll tell you a bit about what those panels are later on. But the idea is, by virtue of just a little bit of chalk and talk to start with, talk about what the consortium is and what it's trying to achieve, how it's doing, and where it is in its life cycle. And then the rest of the day will be much more discursive with panels and fireside chats and so on and so forth. So the scheduled finish is 4 o'clock this afternoon, with an hour after that for discussion and some refreshments. And I hope to see as many of you as possible during that time. So let's start with a message from Julia.
Hello everyone, I'm Julia Lopez, Minister of State for Data and Digital Infrastructure. Our newly formed Department for Science, Innovation and Technology exists to drive innovation that delivers improved public services, creates new, better paid jobs, and of course grows the economy. Many of you will have seen our recent announcement introducing our wireless infrastructure strategy. This is a new policy framework for driving the deployment and of course the adoption of 5G and other forms of advanced wireless connectivity. Within this package, we announced a £40 million fund to create 5G innovation regions. This will encourage the adoption of 5G by businesses and the public sector in places across the country. This next iteration of 5G connectivity coverage across the country will unlock new technologies which will change our lives and, of course, the way in which businesses operate. We've also set out our longer-term approach with the announcement of up to £100 million of R&D funding for future telecoms technologies, including 6G. Underpinning all of this will be the ongoing work to ensure the safety and the security of all our networks. Diversifying the telecom supply chain is an absolutely crucial part of this. That's why we're spending £250 million on the Open Network programme, which includes the funding for the UK Telecoms Innovation Network. It's critical now that we work together to deliver that agenda, combining government backing with industry expertise and international collaboration. When I speak to industry leaders or my counterparts in other countries, it's clear to me that we have the building blocks in place now and that we're taking a real lead in this country in shaping the global debate. It's in that context that I'm delighted to welcome the official launch today of the UK Telecoms Innovation Network, a front door that will make the UK the easiest place in the world for companies to come and be part of driving innovation in the UK. With the £10 million invested by this government, this organisation will guide businesses and researchers looking to access funding or testing facilities in the UK. It will help to drive the 5G supply chain diversification strategy and position the UK as a hub for innovation in telecoms. You will help us to ensure the best use of public and private investment in R&D, and you will ensure that that knowledge is effectively shared across the industry. You will provide the place that fosters collaboration and which makes government support easier to navigate and to work with. So, thank you so much to the partners delivering the network. That's Digital Catapult, Cambridge Wireless, the University of Bristol and WM5G. I'm excited and looking forward to seeing the network grow and develop and become a really critical part of building a thriving UK economy.
Good morning. It's good to hear there from Julia Lopez, our Minister. She wasn't able to make it here in person today, but she is, I think it's probably more or less her last act was to record that video. She's about to go off on maternity leave, so I'm sure you'll understand. My name is Keith Bullock. I work in the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology, and I look forward to the session actually, Nick, where we say what is DCIT or what is it for or whatever, but maybe that was meant to be UKTIN. So I'm going to kick things off by talking a bit of the backstory about how we got to the point where we wanted to fund this UKTIN event, UKTIN as a body, that is. So the department we're in DCIT, it's called digital infrastructure, but I think we'd all know it better as telecommunications. And this is a department that does several things. It's the department that is responsible for broadband rollout in the country. So the gigabit targets, trying to make sure everybody has the broadband infrastructure that we need. It's the part of the organization, part of the policy thinking that you heard Julia talk about wireless infrastructure. So this sets out ambitions for 4G and 5G coverage. And also, as you heard mentioned there, this new funding for innovation regions to actually more actively support the adoption of 5G in those regions. It's the department that also includes telecoms, security and resilience. So these are the people who brought you the legislation around high-risk vendors, which brings you neatly to the department that deals with diversification of the supply chain, which follows on fairly directly from the security and resilience work. So, and within that department also, there's a new piece of funding, again, which Julia mentioned, which is related to the UK capability in regards to future telecoms. Signalling here with, again, another £100 million on the table there about not just the ambition, but I'd say also the longer horizon we're looking to. And I think that is a healthy development that's happened alongside the move of our digital function out of DCMS and into DCIT, and one which I think will influence the thinking of UKTIN and the role and the contribution of UKTIN as it gets established. So, Julia mentioned the 250 million programme, and the funding for UKTIN comes out of that 250 million. Hopefully, you'll be pleased to hear that all the planning around that, it doesn't come from a group of us sitting together in Whitehall figuring out what to do. It relies wholly on the engagement that we do with industry and with players in adjacent, internationally and in other industries related to ours. The telecommunications diversification strategy was led by a task force, or I should say influenced heavily by a task force which was made up of senior industry representatives from across academia, the vendor community, the operators, and elsewhere. And they were very clear that that guidance, that lead from industry wasn't just to be a one-off thing when it all began. It had to be part of our continued operations. It had to become part of how we operate. And so it's not too big a step from there to get from there to knowing that we have to engage continually and with imagination and with openness to all of the people who can contribute to delivering on our strategies. So that's one good reason for establishing the UKTIN organisation. And the other is our experience of doing this before. So we are the department that delivered the 5G testbeds and trials programme, which has just ended. And in all of the wrap-up that goes around delivering these programmes on proving it was worthwhile, it became very clear that a massive amount of the value that was delivered there was in building the so-called ecosystem, the community of interest around this, and sharing ideas. Because I think we can safely say that from a political point of view, there's every good reason to think that a belief in the value that this nation has the right digital infrastructure will sustain through whatever changes come again. And it's equally clear that the debate about what exactly government should do with that and how it should spend its money is going to remain as lively a debate as it ever has. So from our point of view, UKTIN is our way into that. It's a way of making sure we're listening, that we're connected with industry in the right way, and that we are shaping policies appropriately in the future. So that's it for me. I think the first test for UKTIN would always be, it has to establish an audience, it has to establish credibility, of course. And it's already clear. There's a fantastic audience here today. It's a great start, and a good list of very distinguished speakers as well. So it's very promising. My team are here all day. If you'd like to hear more from the department, there's several of us here today. Would love to talk to you, and I hope you have a fantastic event and look forward to talking to you more. Thank you.
Well, that was a Freudian slip, wasn't it? I mixed up UKTIN and DCIT. Better not do that again. So what, yes, at least I spelt it right on the slide. So I'm going to talk a bit, in answering the question, what is it? I'm going to start with why. And I think Keith and Julia have both given an intro to that segment. Talk a little bit about what it is physically, the structures, a little bit about the internal anatomy of the project. Although the most important thing, I think, for us here is actually what does it look like from the outside? What is it delivering? What services is it providing to the community, to the ecosystem, in the innovation ecosystem in the UK? That's the most thing. And I think by the end of this session, you'll have a much clearer idea about what's going on there. And finishing off there with the where is it? Where are we in the cycle of delivery in all the various elements that we are seeking to deliver? And then a little bit finishing up there with talking a bit about the rest of the day, the particular panel sessions and fireside chats, by which you can then dig into all the bits that I've missed out or I've glossed over during my presentation. I'm sure you'll have lots of questions about why is it what it is, all of the things that I may have not been able to go into in enough detail. You'll have the chance during the day, listening to panels, interrogating those panels from the floor, plenty of time for Q&A during that day, and obviously following on afterwards. So a bit of history, I think. So Keith alluded to that already a little bit. So history's year zero, as far as this was concerned, is 2 years ago, pretty much to the month. The Telecom Diversification Task Force reported, and that produced a series of recommendations which were reinforced or confirmed, I would say, by an internal report from between DCMS confirming the idea of a fragmentation is a key word here, a fragmentation of the innovation landscape in the UK, that people weren't really well connected up, and the innovation was being very kind of clunky in the way it was proceeding from idea to deployment, and confirming that point. And those things together have delivered a set of enduring policy objectives, if you like, which UKTIN has picked up and is now working through with the ecosystem to think about things like the front door service. We'll talk about what we mean by that in a slide or so's time. The skills gap is a absolutely crucial one. I'm surprised really how pervasive that conversation has become in the time I've been here. It's not just at the deployment end, finding people to actually deploy, dig trenches for fiber, put antennas on masts and so on, but also at the front end of the process. Although that's a little bit out of scope for UKTIN, it's still an important element of the whole chain. I'm talking about diversification, again, a policy objective that continues, a consequence. The HRV element obviously contributes to that, but it was in that sort of late stage life cycle already where consolidation had happened many times over. In my 20 years plus of working in cellular infrastructure, I'd seen many rounds of consolidation, and the number of scale providers of telecoms equipment, telecoms networks, has just really shrunk over that time to a dangerously low level. It needs to be fixed. Revitalizing the SME sector, again, SME is, I think, generally seen as an engine of economic growth. How can UKTIN help with that? And of course, the long-term R&D about that, productizing ideas is an important aspect to this, but generating the long-term idea that feeds the start of the funnel, really key to getting that whole thing working. And then we talk about standards, the role of the UK in standards, standards elements of that. That's at the moment a relatively small part of UKTIN, but we expect it to grow over time. Not much to say there, but we'll come on to a little bit when we talk about the expert working groups. And then in brackets, the adoption piece as well. We talk about adoption in terms of meeting the skills gap. And I think you heard Julia mention the word adoption several times in her speech, and it becomes a key part. And it's about a chorus in one ear is saying, 5G, what was the point of 5G? No business case, blah, blah, blah. On the other hand, it's like, okay, let's find some business cases and let's do something about it to make sure it is adopted, because we can't, 5G is there, right? We can't just sit there and look at it and say, well, that was a waste of time, wasn't it? But actually, the investment's been made. It's time to deploy it and get value out of it. That's a really important part, and UKTIN can help there. All of that really underpinned by, or rather overlaid, or well, whichever way, extended, reinforced by the wireless infrastructure strategy. Okay, and what does that mean? The key thing there really is that number in the middle there. Adoption of 5G in general, but in general, telecoms infrastructure generally will contribute a huge amount of money to the economy. And that take away nothing else from today, but that money, that number is essentially the driving force for all of this. And you'll see these slides later, but other big numbers in terms of economic value, but also in terms of support that is coming along. Keith already mentioned some of that in his presentation. So wireless infrastructure, very much worth a read for giving some extra context for what UKTIN is all about. So this was a slide I put together quite a while ago, really talking about the fragmentation issue. We are all of these elements of the supply chain here, all of the innovation chain, I should say, all kind of somewhat disconnected, somewhat moving in a kind of Brownian motion sort of angle, in rather random directions, and in particular inward investment, not just inward investment, but generally connecting up. People are a bit mystified about how to connect that all up. That's a really important element of that. And then there's another missing part of this in this picture, which is the customer. What is the customer? What does the marketplace want from telecoms innovation? A really key element to this. And wandering around, I think a phrase that was in that front door service report was, this is about exploitation, not about exploration. We need to make sure that this delivers economic value in the short term, as well as long-term intellectual property, intellectual capital, as well as real money capital in the short term. So the goal of UKTIN really is to nudge all of those elements into some sort of line so that then investment has a clear way of evaluating that. And that has its own challenges, to be honest. There's some interesting structural issues in the way telecoms investments are being made or being evaluated, being assessed in the UK, which we can talk about subsequently. I think that's a discussion that's at very early stages. But the idea is looking at all of these elements of the innovation chain and pointing them at a true north, at the global customer base, right? So this is a thing, it's called UKTIN, but it exists in a global context. And it must do that because the UK economy is not big enough to support the level of investment that's required, but also available, right? The actual skills base in the UK, notwithstanding what I said earlier about the skills gap, there's still an enormous amount of talent in the UK producing an awful lot of intellectual capital that can be directed in this way. And the big number there, the 159 billion pounds of added value, that's worth realizing. And so orienting that activity towards the global customer base, and that means the big telcos that we all know and love, the fixed and mobile telcos, the telcos, the emerging telcos, which are starting to take on much more operational responsibility for networks worldwide, looking at the system integrators who have a key role in connecting up disparate elements, and actually a very important role in supply chain diversification. Whereas if elements of the new sort of supplier landscape, in the first instance at least, will lack scale, but there are some scale system integrators around to help put those things together and allow them to be introduced and deployed at scale in a way that those individual companies can't achieve. Very important to understand their priorities in this whole ecosystem. NTN, I apologize for the acronym, non-terrestrial networks. Satellite is an incredibly important and very fast-moving field at the moment. It includes a lot of growth and a lot of technical innovation that we need to accommodate or take into account. And then, of course, there's a growing segment of smaller shared network neutral host providers who are there exploiting existing public spectrum, but also emerging private spectrum, dynamic spectrum sharing models, of which there may only be a handful around the world. One of the best in the world is in the UK at the moment, of course, with Ofcom has its own private shared spectrum licensing model, which is very effective. And I heard Christina Data at MWC talk about the 1,000th private spectrum license that Ofcom had made earlier this year. A very encouraging number and a sign of great growth, which is an important element of this whole ecosystem. And of course, all of those together building around UK policy as well, as we just talked about. So these are really that's the mission of UKTIN, is really to nudge things into alignment so that the investment, the innovation, the long-term R&D, the short-term productization, the skills, the deployment can all happen with that marketplace in mind. So that's about the why. A few slides here about the what. So internally, there's a few work streams. Okay, so these are the 6 important ones, and you can see the policy objectives on the left there that kind of match with those work streams. Of course, every project has a marketing function and an events function. Of course, we are here today by virtue of that. This event is one of many that will be organized over the course of the program as we go forward. But then as we get into this, the front door service, then what is it that we're interested in doing? One of the things we need to find out is about what's going on in the ecosystem, what's going on in university departments, what's going on in industry, what's going on outside the UK as well as inside the UK. And so there's a capability discovery work stream looking at the database of databases, if you like, a rather technical way of describing it, but actually curating all the important data to spot the hotspots of activity in the UK and beyond, and as it says there, the stuff that Google can't find. Right? This is a searchable thing that industry can use. Anybody in the ecosystem can find access to. It will help orient them and direct them in terms of finding a customer, finding an investor, finding a good idea to exploit, and finding a priority area for any of those ideas. Specialist supplier guidance, the kind of human form of that, to say, so that's a service that's already going. A couple of guys in the room, Roger and Tim, that you can search them out during the breaks, are there to provide signposting to support, to connect people up physically. So talk to them. There's a link on the new website, which will take you to them, and they will help you, guide you, connect you up with the things you're looking for in terms of investment, in terms of partner organizations, in terms of customers. And please forgive me, I've forgotten to mention the new web portal at the very beginning. The very first important thing went live this morning, a new website for UKTIN. We've been squatting in UK 5G for a long time. We now have our own special purpose web portal, which we'll come to in a second, but this went live this morning. Looks fantastic and provides a fantastic way of accessing all of these services all in one place. So and then the next work stream down, coordinating UK telecoms future capability, a series of expert working groups, coordination groups, and not to mention the advisory board there. Really, the expert working groups, I think, really important then in analysing, understanding the gaps, the overlaps, the strengths, and the roadmap that the UK innovation system should be guided towards to meet the economic goals of the marketplace, but also the policy goals of HMG. And we'll see a little bit more about those in a second. And continuing on from that, so having sort of oriented, this is the sort of nudging function, having oriented the elements of the innovation chain, then coaching them on these frameworks for innovation translation, outreach to SMEs, innovative companies, and also innovative individuals to get them aligned with and coaching them and upskilling them in that whole innovation process. Translating products into ideas into product into deployable product as we go forward. And then a really important thing there, the bottom thing, actually getting the skills that we need trained, drawn into the industry, upskilled and deployed across the UK, not just, this isn't just a Southeast problem, across the UK. And we've done this in two groups, which we'll talk about, elements through the day, UKTIN talent, talking about the people, and the clusters, talking about the centres of excellence, if you like, around the country, where those upskilling and training activities will take place. So that's the kind of what of UKTIN. Here's the idea of this front door service. What is that? So a signposting service, we talked about the specialist supplier guidance, both nationally and internationally, allowing international players to be guided around the UK system, in an ecosystem, to find the best landing place for their research activities, also for their money. That's an important element. The research capability discovery service, we mentioned that. And then the front door, of course, is a front door to everything, right? So a front door, one front door to help with industry, to help unify a view of government, both onto government, but also of government into the industry, and then a front door for investment. And there's an international angle to this, of course, as well. The front door, if we just open our front door in a small island in the northwest of Europe, that's all very well, but actually projecting that front door out into the world, making sure that everybody knows where to knock when they need to, and actually making sure they're encouraged to do so as well while we're at it. The expert working groups, probably, this is a little bit of an eye chart, apologies for that, but the idea is there are these 9 expert working groups. We'll see a bit more about how they work together, but in these core technology areas, so wireless networking, core networking, security, kind of important, network management, including orchestration, artificial intelligence, nothing would be complete without artificial intelligence, optical comms and photonics, semiconductors, materials, compound semiconductors as well, non-terrestrial networks, and then standards as well, another working group within that group. All of those connected to coordination groups, both from academic point of view, looking at the long-term coordination of what's going on in the UK, industry coordination, looking at the short term, all of that kind of gelling together within that capability, that future capability leadership forum, then actually providing a sort of consolidated output. And then, so this whole group is reporting on a regular cadence at the end of the year as to in both intergovernment and to the industry about what's going on. And then, of course, the advisory board there, very important element. What's that going to, we have a fireside chat with Mike, who's the chairman of the advisory board, coming up, talk a bit more about the role of the advisory board in this whole process. Skills gap. So we talked about the clusters and talent. And here's an example there. So creating opportunities for entrepreneurship by, again, encouraging events, drawing people in from adjacent industries, adjacent skill bases, looking to create new businesses as well as new skills, and then creating the environment there which those things can grow and flourish, and doing that across the UK, across the whole of the UK. And then, of course, front door to the front door. Okay, we need a front door, a physical front door to a concept. So here we are. This is the front page of the new website. And of course, we're talking about things like what's going on in the UK, technologies and trends, the long-term R&D, the research capability discovery service, talking about now the signposting service, how do you access the specialist supplier guidance, commercializing your product, access to the innovation translation service, and then the skills gap thing there, ways into the services that UKTIN is offering all from one place. And then, of course, think for this audience, make sure you're registered. So everybody who was a member of UK 5G has, unless they've opted out, has been automatically enrolled into UKTIN. So you will find, you will have seen some emails, I think, to that effect, or you soon will. And those who aren't already enrolled, please do, and take advantage of all the things that UKTIN has to offer. So, conscious of the passage of time. So a couple of examples here. This is just one of many ways in which the working groups work together really to achieve the goals of UKTIN. So we're talking about expert working groups working with the industry coordination group, talking about productization activities, again, gaps, strengths, overlaps, and roadmap. Talking about and then they talk in turn to the Innovation Translation Service, talking to the UKTIN Clusters Service, and then using that to help inform and diversify the SME community in particular in the UK. So again, one element to this, there's probably a dozen of these that I could draw out. There's another one here just for the completeness, again, sort of expert working groups talking this time to the academic coordination group, looking at longer term, sort of 10-year time frame R&D activities, looking at feeding that into cross-government group there, looking at how that would affect policy over that sort of time, informing policy over that sort of time frame, feeding that into the research capability or taking input from and feeding into the research capability database, discovery service there, and then harmonizing all that through with the strategic leadership group. And again, using that as an information then into future interventions as they emerge. So there's two examples there of the many that we could talk about and will evolve and will emerge naturally as the program develops. Again, UKTIN and clusters. I think I've talked about everything that's on this chart pretty much. We're talking about the talent activity and talking about the clusters, the talent pool, the people elements of getting people, filling the skills gap, and also the regional aspects, the geographical aspects of getting those skills deployed around the country. So here's a timetable. Vicky's going to kill me because I've just gone completely off the color scheme here for this, but I had to go green because it had to be green, right? It can't be red or pink. The green is what's going or is going already or will soon be going. So you can see website and journal. So you picked up the first edition of the journal on the way in. Events, there's a whole string of events coming along over the next 2 years. And you'll hear more about those in due course. The Research Capability Discovery Service, that's actually launches mid-24. But we should talk about, get your feedback there about, that's a sort of full service availability in mid-24. Let's talk about how that will emerge in the meantime. Specialist supplier guidance is going already. Tim and Roger, again, go and find them if you haven't found them already. The expert and strategic working groups, you'll have seen in the media or the social media, LinkedIn and so on, the recruitment drive for the chairs of those activities, but also the members of those groups. So we now have a set of chairs. We'll hear from them later in one of the panels, and how do they, they're essentially getting going. They're in their sort of spinning up that whole process right now. The Future Capability Insights reports, those are deliverables of that expert working group set of processes and connections. They deliver those insight reports into government, but also as white papers into the community at regular intervals over the program. And then the innovation workouts, the investment workouts with these innovation translation activities there, again, spinning up at the moment, will be active very shortly. And then already, I think Robert and Leslie will talk about UKTIN and clusters, talent and clusters as we go forward. So that's where we are in delivery, and the pace is only going to increase as we go forward. So what's happened next? So that's really the chalk and talk section of UKTIN presentation. Now is your chance to get involved in actually quizzing the participants and also other stakeholders in the space. So the first session was chaired by Christina Data from Ofcom. I'm very happy to have her able to chair this session. I think everyone knows Christina, Director of Policy and Analysis at Ofcom. I think I've already mentioned her role in the MWC debate about set-aside spectrum versus private spectrum. Definitely on the side of the angels there. Transforming the UK innovation system, innovation ecosystem. So members then of the whole consortium, so you get a consortium-wide view of the role of UKTIN in the telecoms innovation ecosystem. And follow that by a fireside chat then with Mike Short, then the chair of the advisory board for UKTIN. And then we'll break for networking. And then another chair with Ross Singleton, chair of the Telecom Supply Chain Advisory Council. And also CEO of Spring Fibre, I think everyone knows. I'm looking at the investment elements of telecoms R&D. Is telecom still worth investing in? Is that an important thing? Is it all been done already? I think many of us have made fools of ourselves predicting the end of physics, the end of air interfaces. 4G. I made a presentation once talking about if 4G was going to be the last air interface. I was nearly right. But I think people are still asking that question. Is 5G the last one? We shall see. I think an interesting conversation coming up there. Then there's some lunch, and after lunch we have really now this is the expert working group session. So we're talking then about the topic is enabling the UK to capitalise on its strengths. Again, we talked about strengths, gaps, overlaps, and roadmap then as the activities of the expert working groups. That's where that discussion will happen. So this is all 6, I think, of the expert working group chairs that we've appointed so far there to give their view on this question, chaired by Dritten. And then after that, so it's an hour for that section, plenty of questions in that too. And then finally, the final session today is really about what UKTIN can do for you. Okay, what's in it for you as the community in the UK? So again, members of the delivery organisations then talking about the services that UKTIN is offering. You can see those services there. The people are talking about the capability service, translation, innovation translation, talent and clusters, and supplier specialist guidance there in particular. But they're there to answer your questions. So please ask them. Thank you very much. I'm done for this session. I'm going to hand on to Christina. Christina, welcome to the